How is everybody doing so far? Are you having a good time here? So today I'm going to tell you about my experience building Android apps at Dropbox, some interesting technical and product challenges that we've tackled, and I'm also going to talk about the product development process at Dropbox, because people ask me a lot of questions about that, and how do you decide what to build? And so finally, after that, I'll leave some time for Q&A. So, let's get started with an introduction. But before that, I want to show of hands. So how many of you are Dropbox users? Awesome. I'd love to see that. How many of you are Google Drive users? OK, we can talk later. How many developers from Wunderlist are here today? Nobody. Great. They're all out partying. So first, who am I? By the way, those numbers on the slide, they're all in minutes. So my name is Aakash. I'm an engineer at Dropbox. I work on Dropbox for mobile. I've been at Dropbox about 2 years, and I manage the Android engineering team. Before Dropbox, I built the Android app, also while learning Android development at a small 5-person startup called Familiar. And it was a group photo and video sharing app for groups and families. Unfortunately, it failed because it turns out families are not a very good viral vector for spreading your app. They use the app within themselves and not with others. Before that, I managed teams and built software at Microsoft in various teams, Xbox Live, SkyDrive, SQL Server. Funny story, I was actually one of the lead cloud leads for SkyDrive, and so now I work at Dropbox. It's kind of competition. OK. So before we get to the technical topics, I want to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about Dropbox, because it will set the context for the rest of the talk today and why we do things the way we do. OK, so Dropbox's story began back in like 2006 or so when Drew Houston, our CEO and co-founder, was in college at MIT. So he hopped on a bus to go back home for the winter break, and he was really excited to get a bunch of work done on his coding project. And right when he opened the lid of his laptop, he realized one big mistake. He had left his USB stick with all his code at his dorm. And Drew, like many of us, he thought to himself, man, why am I such an idiot? Why does this keep happening to me? Why does technology not work for me? And so that's when he set out to fix it. On that very same bus ride, he kind of started writing the first lines of code for what eventually became Dropbox. So when the company kind of started in 2007, we lived in a world with like thumb drives, email attachments, USB sticks. But we thought that it made no sense for your stuff not to be with you at all times. We started out by being frustrated with a pretty complicated problem, and we tried to come up with a simple solution to fix that. So what we built was Dropbox, the magic folder. And this is the Dropbox that you're all pretty familiar with. And so for the first time, users realized that even if they kind of drop their computer and destroy their hard drive completely, they could just continue right from where they left off, because all their data was safe and they'd not lost it. And so they never kind of had that before. I mean, there were external hard drives and such, but you can lose those too. So people really love this. They love it enough that they're willing to say that they love it out loud on social media, on Twitter, writing feedback to us. And it's kind of funny, because this is basically cloud storage. It's not a very sexy technology, and people tweet about us saying, we love Dropbox. And it's not an accident that people love it. Part of the secret of all this love comes from our business model. And our business model is that basically we provide a service. And we make money when people who use our service decide that our service is so valuable to them that they want to pay for greater access, for more features, for more storage. That means that we have to make software that's so good that people are actually willing to pay money for it. So in today's world, a lot of companies give away their software for free. But most of them make money by advertising or by selling personal information to other companies. And to some extent, they're working for both, they're developing a product for users, but they're also developing a product for advertisers. Dropbox, on the other hand, is selling our software and service directly to users. And you all probably know this, but users don't want to pay for anything unless it works, A, really well, and B, it gives them a lot of value, more so than what it costs, a lot more so. So why is this important? It's important because it forces us to build the best possible software, something people will be willing to pay for. And so we have to kind of go the extra mile every time we build something to build a very delightful user experience, because that's the only way people will actually pay for something. And you should also do this in all the apps that you build, because it just makes users really happy. And so why am I talking about this? Because it's going to set the stage for some of the optimizations I'm going to talk about next, why we actually bother to do them. We could have totally not done them and just shipped it without, but it makes a difference. OK, let's get on with it. So I'm going to go to the technical portion of the talk. It's actually going to be a two-part talk. In the first part, I'm going to focus on some technical and product challenges that we've tackled to improve the user experience. This addresses kind of the what and the why of the software that we build. And in the second part, I'm going to talk about the product development process at Dropbox, the how, in some ways. So the two product and technical challenges I'm going to talk about, the first one is about Carousel and how Carousel loads thumbnails on Android. And this portion is going to do a little bit of a deep dive into some performance optimizations that we've made to make the user experience better. And the second scenario is something we call getting started, which is something we built to help users get familiar with Dropbox on their phone. OK, thumbnail loading in Carousel. So what's Carousel? It's Dropbox's dedicated photo gallery app. It's available on Android, iOS, and web. If you haven't had a chance to take a look, please do. Hopefully, after this talk, you'll be more convinced. So in a lot of photo gallery apps, you'll see this screen quite a lot. And you see this when you scroll quickly or you fling the photos. And these gray squares represent thumbnails that have not yet been loaded and displayed on the screen. And so you're scrolling through your photos, you're trying to find a specific photo or a group of photos from some event, but all you see is this gray. And you have to wait for all the photos to load before you can continue scrolling, because you don't know what you're looking at right now. OK, and here's what happens in Carousel. So this is our native library loading. It's a little slow, but OK. So you see that the photos are always all there. Even if the user scrolls faster, the photos are always there. At the bottom, there's a timeline. And you can just scrub on the timeline, and the photos will always be there instantly. Yeah, that is typically significantly different from most of other photo loading apps out there. So why is this different, and why isn't it simple? Why doesn't everybody's app look like that? Well, because there's a lot of complexity. So in order to load the thumbnails, for some apps, you have to download them from the cloud and get them to the local storage on the phone. If you're just loading apps from your photo gallery, then you don't have that. Then you have to get the photos from. So the first thing is, you need serious compression for the thumbnail so that you can have a lot of it cached on the device. Then you need to get the photos from disk into memory. And so you need really good prefetching so that you always have the data available when you need it. And then finally, you need to get the compressed data, the photo that's in memory. You need to decode it into a bitmap. And many apps combine the second and the third stage together, so you kind of load it and do a streaming decode or something. So most companies are actually pretty good at the first two. So I'm just going to focus on this last layer of how we get the compressed thumbnails decoded to just in time to show them, so that there's always no gray on the screen. So why isn't this decoding so simple? Well, if you went to Lucas's talk this morning, he talked about some performance optimizations. And basically, Android's frame rate is 60 frames per second. And the way this works is, most people, when they're scrolling, typically it's common for 2 new rows of photos or thumbnails to show up on screen. And if you want to get 60 frames per second frame rate, then you have less than 17 milliseconds to actually do all the work on your UI thread. And for a typical screen size, which is about 600 pixels wide or so, or 600 dp wide, 3 thumbs across is about 200 to 250 pixels per thumbnail, which takes about 10 milliseconds per thumbnail to decode on a typical Nexus 4 class of device. And I say Nexus 4 because you do want to make sure your app behaves well even on slightly older devices. And if you do the math, if you have 6 new thumbnails to load, 10 milliseconds each, that's way more than 17 milliseconds. And so, here's a picture from the system trace tool. The top row is basically Android drawing frames. The bottom row is basically, we made a dummy build just to demonstrate this, where there's that pink section right there. That's when we're actually trying to load thumbnails. And because they're so big, it takes a while to load them. You see that it takes longer than 17 milliseconds, and then you have all these drop frames on Android. But why are drop frames bad? Well, they're bad because if you do too much work on the UI thread, then they're late, and the Android framework will just drop them instead of trying to render them late. And when you have drop frames, you have less than 60 frames per second. Then there's a perception of stuttering by the user, and you don't get that really smooth, like you get that little jagginess when you're scrolling in a list view or view page or whatever. So nobody wants their app to feel laggy, right? And so what most developers do is that if you're scrolling really fast, they know that they're going to have this problem. And so they just don't bother doing bitmap decoding until the scroll speed slows down. It's actually preferable to have gray squares over having drop frames. But we wanted to go a step further. We wanted to have a slightly better user experience because our whole app kind of structure is around finding photos in your Dropbox as quickly as possible, and you can scrub quickly to go back to a certain event in time. So how did we solve this? Well, here's a couple of screenshots of Carousel while it's scrolling really fast. And if you look at these screenshots over here, I don't know if the people in the back can see it, but they're actually pretty pixelated. They're not full resolution thumbnails. So the key here is that we're not optimizing for beautiful screenshots. We're optimizing for a beautiful user experience. And when you're scrubbing really quickly through your photo collection, looking for something, you actually don't need the full 250 or 300 pixel thumbnail. You just need something with the right colors and shapes in it, and your brain can kind of fill in the rest and like, oh, this is the photo I'm actually looking for. And then when you slow down, that's when you want a high resolution thumbnail. And so when you're flinging or scrolling really fast, in 100 milliseconds, the screen is going to be off screen. And so why bother with high resolution thumbnails? So how do we do it? Well, when you're scrolling really fast, we actually switch to loading 75 pixel thumbnails because they will decode really quickly. And then when you slow down or when you're stopped, we always want to show the 250 pixel thumbnails because then they don't look pixelated. They look crisp and clean. And so the full solution is basically on your main thread, we're only usually decoding and rendering 75 pixel thumbnails. And you're queuing up the 250 pixel thumbnails to decode on a background thread. And we swap them in to the view once they're actually fully decoded. But if you're scrolling fast and the image actually is now off screen, you want to dequeue those large thumbnail decodes off of your background thread so you're not doing wasted work. So this is a trace of the real carousel handling a fast scroll. So you'll see some examples right there where each of those pink slots represents the 75 pixel thumbnails being loaded and decoded. And you see that they're small enough that you can actually do that in that 17 milliseconds that you have. And in the middle row, you'll see the background thread. Actually, we're queuing up the decode bitmaps for the cases where we actually want the higher resolution 250 pixel thumbnails. And if you look at the top, the surface flinger, it's not actually dropping any frames. It's just very crisply running at 60 frames per second. And so the outcome is that the user never sees any gray squares. When you're scrolling fast, the decode requests are queued and then dequeued off of the background thread, and we don't do any wasted work loading the big thumbnails. And when the user starts slowing down, the background queued bitmap decodes start finishing, and then we swap them in once they're completed to replace the 75-pixel thumbnails. Everybody with me so far? OK, cool. All right, well, let's talk about something else then. OK, getting started. So getting started is something we did to improve the first-run experience for users who specifically sign up for Dropbox on their Android device, as opposed to on the web or on their desktop. So what is getting started? Well, it's a guided kind of handheld first-run experience for new users. It's only shown to users who sign up on the phone, and the entry point is through this persistent notification in our kind of notifications feed. It's basically a Dropbox tutorial. So when you click on that notification, you see the screen here. And it's like a checklist of tasks to perform. And each of those tasks can be clicked on, and it'll take you kind of to the relevant place in the app where you can perform each of those actions. And so why is this important? Well, we realize that users who install Dropbox on their phone get some value out of it. But the users who get the most value out of Dropbox are people who have it both on their phone and on their computer. Most creative work happens on the computer. Most content is created on the computer. And so it's really important. It's really important to have Dropbox on your computer so you can easily add that content to Dropbox. And it's also really important because you have a lot of that existing content on your computer that you created in the past, but you don't have it on your phone. I mean, most people use their phone for consuming content, and they don't have their files on their phone. I think Photos is the only exception. And so what this does is it explains the value proposition of Dropbox to the user by kind of doing as opposed to just telling, right? The user can actually click on those and then do things like adding their photo content to Dropbox or installing Dropbox on their computer. The interesting thing here is that we incentivize the user to actually complete these tasks by giving them some free space as a reward. So it's a little bit of gamification thrown in there to actually get them to do this. So I'm going to actually talk about a specific task in the getting started. It's this task called install Dropbox on your computer. And what we call that Desktop Connect. And Desktop Connect is a flow designed to simplify the installation of Dropbox on your computer once you've installed it on your phone. And it's important. We want users to install it on their computer. That's when they get the most value out of it. That's when the value they get out of it exceeds the kind of the cost of Dropbox. And that's when they're actually willing to pay us for it. And this is important enough for us that we actually have multiple entry points into this flow. If you sign up for Dropbox, typically you'll have no files in it. And so you'll see this empty screen. And we have this Setup Now button that takes you to this flow. We have an entry point to this inside the Getting Started task. It's called Install Dropbox on your computer. You can also go to your settings and click on Link a Computer, and it also launches the same flow. So repetition is important because it gets users to, you want to funnel users into performing this flow. So in order to reinforce it, what are some of the other things we do? Once you actually click on that, we show them the screen, and we ask them, are you near a computer? Right? And if they say yes, then they'll continue on the flow. But if they say not now, well, that's an opportunity for us to actually show them a notification at some point later, maybe a few days later, reminding them that, hey, maybe you're near a computer now. Do you want to perform this task? And then once you actually click yes and you launch this flow, this is what you see. It's a very, very step-by-step process designed to make things really easy. So we ask them to go to Dropbox.com Connect on their computer. And once they do that, this is what they see. They see the screen on their computer. And you can see that, that number one, the first task that you started on your phone, that continues on your computer to kind of keep that sequence going. It's a very Dropboxy screen. It's very clean. We stuck our logo in there. But if you actually look at that logo carefully, there's a whole bunch of QR codes embedded in that logo. And so when the instructions there say, tap next on your phone and then point it at the image below. And when you actually hit next, it launches a camera in-pane camera screen. And then when you point it at this, the camera actually scans the QR code. And when that scans that QR code, you see this screen, which basically says, it's a very personalized screen. It has my name on it, and it tells you what it's doing. It's downloading Dropbox on your computer, and then it has that little thing which points to the actual installer that we are downloading. The installer is really small, maybe a few hundred kilobytes, because we wanted to complete this download really fast. If you have a large file that's downloading, people have a attention span of maybe 1 or 2 seconds. And if it's going to take like 15, 20 seconds, they switch to a different tab, and they completely forget about this task. And so once you actually click on that, the installer launches. It's a personalized installer because you already signed in to the website, and when you downloaded the installer, so it already has your credentials embedded in it, and you don't actually need to type your credentials in anymore. And so how does this work? Well, so on the back end, we generate a 24-byte kind of token and nonce, and we store it in memcache with a very, very fast expiration time. And then we generate a QR code for that token and nonce with a URI associated with it, and we actually embed it in this image. And on the phone, on the phone, when you go to dropbox.com/connect, that token is generated, and the website shows you the QR code. And it kind of starts polling the backend, saying, hey, has the user actually completed the second half of the flow on their phone? And then when you point your phone at the screen, we have the camera going. It scans the QR code. We get the URI out of it, and we ping the kind of server endpoint. And since you're already signed in on your phone with Dropbox, and when we hit the server, we pass the user's credentials from the phone up to the server. Now the server can associate the user's credentials or the user ID of the phone with this whatever user is on the website, and basically you can log them into the website automatically as a result. And so that way you can kind of get browser login on Dropbox, even though you sign into Dropbox on your phone. And of course, this is not, it seems simple at a high level, but you need to handle all kinds of edge cases, like their token being evicted out of memcache because there was memory pressure, or because the user sat on that Dropbox.com connect page for too long. You can have connection errors. On some Android devices, QR codes don't scan correctly. So all kinds of issues. So why did we build this? Well, most of our users sign up for Dropbox on mobile first. But we found that desktop users are the most engaged and productive. And in fact, desktop plus mobile users are even more engaged and productive. Mobile users have no content on sign up. So it's kind of like a chicken and egg problem. Like services like Spotify can show you a whole bunch of music when you sign up for the first time. But here, this is your stuff that you're putting in Dropbox. It's a little easier on the phone. You have photos, which is why one of the tasks tells you to turn on camera upload on your phone. But we want to get your other content into Dropbox too. And that mobile to desktop transition is high friction. Just telling the users, oh, go to the website, download the client, install it, doesn't work as well as something like this. Of course, there's a large download. People forget the password that they sign up on the phone for. So yeah, that's basically why we built this. Are you guys still here? OK, cool. All right, I'm going to switch tracks a little bit, talk about product development at Dropbox. This is more of the human side of things, so the rest of my talk is not very technical anymore. A lot of people ask me, how do we work on a day-to-day basis? How do we decide what to build? So here's kind of the inside look. There's nothing revolutionary here. I mean, a lot of you probably do this, but hopefully it'll give you an insight out of how things work at our company. So basically, I think of product development as kind of a three-pronged approach. There are the company-wide initiatives. Those are the features or products that we build across all the platforms. So we build them on web, we build them on desktop, we build them on mobile. And these are kind of the big features, the marquee features, the things we make press announcements for, right? And these are driven by product managers, based on strategy, user research, competition, blah, blah, blah. The second set of things we do is kind of for growth and engagement, right? This is to increase and engage your user base, increase your key metrics, increase revenue. And this is mostly driven by kind of the high-level company goals for the year, like where do we want our user base to be in a year? Where do we want our revenue to be at the end of the year? Things like that. And the third one, which is kind of the most exciting for me, is kind of bottom-up innovation. And this is basically putting power in the hands of engineers, right? This is letting your engineers come up with the new product ideas and the new features, right? You've hired really, really smart people to work at your company, so let them actually contribute to product development. Run experiments, like do A/B testing, do all the things to see what works. So yeah, engineers are smart. Let them contribute to product development. Do a lot of experimentation. We actually hack a lot on our product to see what works and what doesn't work. We use 1% experimentation on Android a lot, again, to see what features are sticky, what is not sticky, what is actually working for users. And finally, we have something called Hack Week. This is a week-long 20% time, but it's 100% time for a week. Happens a couple of times or a few times a year. And basically, it's a week where you can not do your regular job and just do anything, like just build any new product, any new feature. It doesn't necessarily have to be Dropbox related. It can be anything technology related, right? And a lot of innovation comes out of this. And a lot of the stuff that comes out of this actually ends up in our primary product. So we recently launched a feature called Harmony, which is this blue bubble that shows up on Microsoft Word. And if you're in a shared folder and editing a file in a shared folder, it tells you the blue bubble turns red if somebody else you shared with also has that file open. And if they've edited that file, it'll tell you that John has edited this file. You probably don't want to touch it right now. So that was something that came out of Hack Week. Somebody just hacked it up in like 3 days, and eventually we made it into a product. Cool. So last thing is I want to talk about team structure. We have a very monolithic platform team. We have an Android team. We have an iOS team. And the bottleneck here is kind of team bandwidth. We prioritize our feature requests across all kind of incoming features for maximum impact. And that means that some feature requests get starred because they're small requests. And the future is basically we want to spread mobile talent into feature teams across the company. While maintaining kind of primary app ownership with this core platform team. And so what are the benefits of feature teams? Well, you can iterate very quickly on new features. You can make progress without being blocked on the kind of Android experts. And you can have all the disciplines working very closely together to ship stuff. And also the important thing is that there's long-term ownership of features. There's not this notion of drive-by coding where somebody basically just builds something for like a sprint or a milestone, and then they move on to working on web, and then move on to working on infrastructure. And then you're stuck like maintaining that feature. And also it helps them kind of make progress on the kind of the smaller impact features, which may not be important for us to do, but it's interesting for, say, the growth team to work on. And the core platform team will, it's important that they maintain ownership of critical product functionality. So in our case, for example, the core Dropbox file browser would still be owned by the platform team. And their other role is to accelerate the rest of the company through, better tooling, more, better abstractions, more modular code, and also, spreading Android expertise throughout the company. You want to really make sure that if you have this model, this core platform team is happy and they have strong product ownership, because otherwise it's very easy to put them in this role where they're just fixing bugs or fixing other people's problems or doing code reviews, and it can lead to people getting dissatisfied. So you want to be careful about making sure they actually feel strongly vested in the product. Okay, so both these models have kind of pros and cons. In the monolithic model, you get really deep platform integration because everybody working on the team is kind of an Android expert. And you have this really, really deep, cohesive user experience across all the features in your app. But when you have feature teams, then you get fast development and iteration. But potentially, the people working on those teams aren't necessarily deep Android experts, and so you might have slightly lower quality. And this is a matter of time. Expertise will come by doing. So you want to make sure that the folks on the feature teams aren't basically working on Android for 3 months and then jumping to iOS for another 3 months and then jumping to web for the next month. You want to make sure that they specialize in something. And during the Q&A, I would love to hear if any of you have done this and what works and what doesn't work. Cool. So that's mostly it. Before we go to Q&A, I just very quickly want to say this. We love Android engineers. We are hiring both here and in the US. We have paid and full-time positions, both internships and full-time positions. And if you're interested, send an email to me. My email is sky@dropbox.com. And there's a lot of good benefits of working at Dropbox. You get unlimited vacation. You get unlimited Dropbox storage. You get to work in, take part in multiple hack weeks per year. And you're surrounded by really, really smart people. So you're constantly learning from them. But I think the most amazing perk of Dropbox is the food. So we have an in-house kitchen at work. We call it the Tuck Shop. And you get free breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day. No dish is ever repeated, ever. And so here's a peek at just 1 week worth of the food from the Tuck Shop. Wait for it.
Well.
Well, lunch is next, so. Cool. So, yeah. And that's about it from me. Thank you.
Thank
if you have
you.
any questions,